The Zalthorn Empire had ruled space for 3,000 years. They were strong and feared by everyone. Their ships were big and their weapons were powerful. When they found Earth, they saw weak humans who had just learned to travel between stars. Commander Vekthar looked at the screen showing Earth. The humans were new to space. Their ships were small and slow. Their weapons were old. He smiled because this would be easy. "Get ready to attack," Vekthar said to his soldiers. "We will win in a few days." Captain Jake Morrison was flying his ship near the edge of human space when he saw them. Dozens of huge alien ships appeared from nowhere. Each ship was 3 times bigger than anything humans had ever built. "Contact Earth now," Jake said to his crew. His hands shook, but his voice stayed calm. "Tell them we have big trouble." The aliens did not try to talk. They did not ask for anything. They just started shooting. The human colony on New Boston had 50,000 people living there. The alien weapons turned everything to ash in minutes. Lieutenant Amy Harris was drinking coffee with her sister when the attack started. The sky turned red and bright. The shields around the colony tried to protect everyone, but they broke in less than 1 minute. Amy ran into a storage building to get her tablet. That choice saved her life. When the shooting stopped, Amy walked outside. Everything was gone. Her sister was dead. Her friends were dead. The whole city was burning and empty. She fell to her knees and cried. 6 hours later, a message came from the Zalthorn Empire. It was short and mean. "Give up now or we will destroy every human world." Humanity had 1 week to decide. President Helen Carter stood in front of the Earth Council. Her face was hard and angry. "They think we are weak. They think we will break easily. They do not understand what they just did to us." Admiral Paul Grant was the top military leader. He leaned forward in his chair. "Madam President, their fleet is 10 times bigger than ours. Their technology is hundreds of years better than ours. If we fight them, we will lose. If we give up, we lose everything," Helen said back. "Humans did not come to space just to bow down to bullies. Get our ships ready, Admiral." Every single one. The week went by fast. Civilian ships got weapons added to them. Mining lasers became guns. Every person who could hold a weapon signed up to fight. The people who survived New Boston could leave or they could fight. Amy chose to fight. She joined the Marines and finished training in 4 days instead of 12 weeks. Her teacher said she moved through combat training with cold anger. They had never seen anyone like her. When they asked why she pushed so hard, her answer was simple. "They took everything from me. I want it back." The Zalthorn fleet came back to Earth exactly 1 week later. They expected humans to give up. Instead, they found every human warship waiting for them. Thousands of civilian ships with guns were there too. Commander Vekthar laughed when he saw the human fleet. "They are fools. Kill them all." The Zalthorn did not know that desperate humans were dangerous, very dangerous. The Battle of Earth lasted 3 days. Captain Jake Morrison led 12 fighters straight into the enemy formation. The alien defense system should have killed them in seconds. But humans had learned something about Zalthorn shields during that terrible week. "All ships shoot at Point Baker 7, Jake ordered. "Give them everything we have." 12 ships fired at one spot on the big enemy cruiser. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the shield broke and the whole side of the ship lost protection. "That is our opening," Jake shouted. "Go now." His fighters flew through the gap and shot at the hull directly. The huge ship shook as explosions ripped through it from inside. The ship did not blow up, but something more important happened. It showed that the Zalthorn could be hurt. On the ground, Marine Lieutenant Amy Harris and her unit got on a big assault ship. The plan was crazy and probably meant death. But it might work. "Listen," their Sergeant Marcus Lee shouted over the engine noise. "We are going to board an alien ship and take it from inside. They have better shields and better weapons, but they never fought humans up close. Show them that was a mistake." The assault carrier was an old mining ship called the Defiant. Enemy fire hit the hull hard, but the ship kept going. At the last moment, it released boarding pods at the nearest enemy destroyer. Amy's pod hit the alien hull hard enough to hurt. The cutting charges burned through the metal in seconds. Then she and her squad were inside with weapons raised. The Zalthorn soldiers were 7 feet tall with thick armor and plasma guns that could kill a human with 1 shot. But they were not ready for angry human soldiers who had nothing left to lose. Amy moved on instinct. Her rifle fired and enemies fell. 1 alien, then another, then 3 more dropped dead. Her squad moved beside her with perfect teamwork born from desperation. "Engineering section 2 decks down," Marcus called out. "Move fast. They fought through the ship deck by deck. The Zalthorn were stronger and had better weapons. But the humans had rage and clever thinking. When rifles ran out of bullets, they used alien weapons. When those failed, they used knives and tools and bare hands. Amy found herself facing a Zalthorn officer in the command center. The alien raised its weapon, but she was faster. She dove under the shot and drove her knife into a gap in its armor. The Zalthorn fell with a grinding metal sound. "Engineering secured," Marcus said over the radio. "Setting bombs now." "All boarding teams, get back to your pods," came the order from Fleet Command. 30 seconds. Amy and her unit ran back through the corridors. The Zalthorn crew was hunting them now. They reached their pod with seconds left and sealed the door. The pod shot away from the destroyer just as Marcus's bombs exploded. The explosion tore through the engineering section and split the huge warship in two pieces. Admiral Paul Grant watched from the bridge of the Constitution as the battle continued. Humans were losing ships fast, but they were taking Zalthorn ships with them. Every captain whose ship was dying turned toward the nearest enemy and rammed at full speed. Every boarding team that got onto an enemy ship fought until they won or died. "Admiral, we have a message from the Zalthorn flagship," his communications officer said. "Let me hear it." Commander Vekthar appeared on the screen. His alien face looked angry or confused. "You fight with no honor and no strategy. You throw away your lives like they mean nothing. This is crazy." "No," Paul said calmly. "This is war, and you brought it to our home." The battle went on for 2 more days. The Zalthorn had more ships and better technology. But humans had something the aliens could not understand. Humans absolutely refused to surrender. When Zalthorn ships tried to retreat, human fighters chased them. When aliens tried to regroup, human boarding teams attacked from unexpected directions. By the end of the 3rd day, the Zalthorn First Fleet was cut in half. Commander Vekthar did something that had never happened before. He ordered everyone to retreat. As his remaining ships jumped away to escape, he sent one last message to Earth. "You won this battle, humans. But the Empire has 1,000 fleets. You cannot win this war." President Helen Carter stood in the ruins of the Orbital Defense Station. She looked down at Earth through the broken windows. The planet survived, but the cost was huge. 30% of Earth's fleet was destroyed. Hundreds of thousands were dead. "Madam President, the people are asking what happens next," her aide said quietly. Helen turned from the window. Her face was hard as stone. "Next, we take the war to them. They wanted to see what humans can do. Let us show them." 6 months passed after the Battle of Earth. The Zalthorn Empire still did not understand what happened. They sent 3 more fleets to crush the human resistance. All 3 fleets were beaten back with heavy losses. The species that should have surrendered in days kept fighting and winning. High Command called an emergency meeting. Fleet Commander Zarnoth was the supreme military leader of the Empire. He spoke with barely hidden anger. "How are these primitive humans still fighting? Our technology is better. Our numbers are bigger. Yet they keep winning. They do not fight like any species we ever met," one officer said. "They do not care about losses. They do not retreat when they should. They fight like every battle is their last. Then we will give them the war they want," Zarnoth decided. "Send the 5th, 6th, and 7th fleets. We will attack their colony worlds at the same time. When they see their homes burning, they will break." But the Zalthorn High Command did not know that humans had changed their plans. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new carrier, called Eagle's Talon. After the Battle of Earth, he got promoted and given command of a strike group designed for long-range attacks. "Our orders are clear," he told his officers. "While the Zalthorn focus on our colonies, we go after their supply lines. Every cargo ship, every fuel station, every undefended convoy between here and their core worlds." Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant raised an eyebrow. "That is not exactly normal military strategy, sir." Jake smiled, but his face was hard. "The normal way was written by people who never had to fight for survival. We are writing a new way." Across human space, dozens of similar strike groups formed. Fast attack ships, converted civilian vessels, even single fighters operating alone. Each one had the same mission: make the Zalthorn Empire bleed for every inch they moved forward. Amy Harris was now a captain after her actions during the Battle of Earth. She led a special operations team with the most dangerous missions. Their current job was to sneak into a Zalthorn supply depot and destroy the ammunition that would fuel their next attack. Her team of 12 Marines approached the depot from the dark side of a dead moon. Their ship was coated in materials that made them nearly invisible to Zolthorn sensors. They landed softly and moved toward their target in complete silence. "Remember," Amy whispered over the secure radio. "In and out. Set the bombs, fall back, and blow it from a safe distance." They had learned a lot about Zolthorn security in 6 months of war. The aliens relied heavily on their computers and assumed their sensors would detect any threat. They did not post guards in areas their computers said were secure. It was pride that humanity learned to use against them. Amy's team slipped through the depot's defenses like ghosts. They planted bombs on every critical system they could find. They were almost clear when a Zolthorn patrol stumbled across their exit point. "Contact!" Sergeant Marcus Lee hissed and raised his weapon. The fight was brief and brutal. Amy's team had surprise on their side, but the Zolthorn had backup close by. Within minutes, alarm sirens were wailing and more enemy soldiers were coming. "Blow the bombs now," Amy ordered. "We will take our chances with the explosion." The depot's ammunition went up like a small star. The explosion was visible from orbit. It was a brilliant flash that destroyed everything within 2 miles. Amy's team survived only because they had taken cover in a reinforced bunker they found during the mission. When they came out hours later, the depot was gone. And with it, enough ammunition to supply 3 Zolthorn fleets for a month. Similar attacks happened across dozens of systems. Human strike teams with minimal support and maximum aggression struck at every weak point in the Zolthorn supply network. Cargo ships disappeared. Fuel stations exploded. Communication relays went dark. The Zolthorn military, machine that had worked perfectly for thousands of years, began to fail. Admiral Paul Grant coordinated the overall strategy from Earth. He moved strike groups like chess pieces across a board that covered hundreds of light years. When the Zolthorn gathered forces to protect one area, he hit them somewhere else. When they tried to spread out to cover more ground, he focused his forces for devastating attacks. "Admiral, we are getting reports that the Zolthorn 6th Fleet had to stop their attack on New Chicago Colony," his aide said. "They are running low on fuel and ammunition." Paul allowed himself a small smile. "Good. What about the 7th Fleet?" "Still moving toward New Austin, but they are 3 days behind schedule and asking for help, which we will not let them get. Send Strike Group Charlie to stop any supply convoys heading that way." President Helen Carter joined him on the command deck. She looked tired but determined. "Paul, we are winning the small battles, but we cannot keep this up forever. We need to force them to talk peace. Then we hit them where it really hurts," Paul replied. "Their core worlds. They have never been attacked on their home territory. Time to change that." The plan was so bold it seemed crazy. Take a strike force deep into Zolthorn territory and attack their industrial centers. Show them that nowhere was safe. Show them that humanity could reach them anywhere. Captain Jake Morrison volunteered to lead the mission. So did Amy Harris. So did 10,000 other humans who understood the risks and accepted them anyway. "This is a one-way trip," Jake told his crew before they left. "We are going into the heart of enemy territory with no support, no backup, and no guarantee we make it home. Anyone who wants to back out, now is your chance." Not a single person left the room. The strike force called Task Force Vengeance left human space 2 weeks later. 50 ships carrying the best and most experienced fighters humanity had. Their target was Zolthorn Prime, the Empire's capital world. The journey took 3 weeks of hard travel through hostile space. They fought off patrol ships, avoided detection grids, and flew through systems no human had ever seen. Every day, Jake expected to run into a fleet they could not beat. Every day, they somehow slipped through. When they finally reached the Zolthorn Prime system, even the battle-hardened veterans were stunned. Orbital stations larger than Earth's moon. Defense platforms with enough firepower to destroy planets. Shipyards where entire fleets were being built at the same time. "That is what we are up against," Jake said quietly. "That is the full might of the Zolthorn Empire." "Then let us introduce ourselves," Amy replied from her assault ship. Task Force Vengeance struck like a hammer. They avoided the military targets and went straight for civilian infrastructure. Refineries, manufacturing plants, the massive space elevator that connected the planet to orbit. Nothing that would cause mass deaths, but everything that would hurt the Empire's ability to make war. The Zolthorn defenders responded with overwhelming force, but by then it was too late. The damage was done. As Task Force Vengeance fought its way back out of the system, leaving burning facilities behind, they sent one message to the Empire's leaders. You thought you could attack us without consequences. You were wrong. The raid on Zalthorn Prime sent shockwaves through the Empire. For 3,000 years, the core worlds had been safe behind layers of defense no enemy had ever broken. Now crude human ships had struck at the heart of the Empire itself. High Commander Zarnoth stood before the Imperial Council knowing his career was over. The humans have proven more resilient than we thought. Perhaps it is time to consider talking instead of fighting. Talking? Council leader Thexfar's voice was full of contempt. You mean surrender? We should bow to these primitives? I mean negotiation, Zarnoth replied. Before the cost becomes too high. He was removed from command that same day. His replacement War Commander Krelnak had built his reputation on brutality and overwhelming force. He had crushed 17 rebellions across the Empire. Each one ended with complete destruction of the rebel worlds. The humans want war? Krelnak spoke to his assembled fleet commanders. We will give them war. No more holding back. No more mercy. Every human world will burn until they beg for death. 8 months of constant war had changed humanity. The desperate defenders of Earth had become battle-hardened veterans. The improvised tactics had evolved into refined doctrine. The scattered colonies had united into a military force that punched far above its weight. Captain Jake Morrison had survived the raid on Zalthorn Prime, though his ship barely made it back. He was now advising the Joint Chiefs on offensive strategy and sharing the hard lessons his task force had learned. The Zalthorn are changing their approach, he warned during a strategy session. Intelligence suggests they are gathering forces for a major push. Multiple fleets attacking all fronts at once. They are going to try to overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Admiral Paul Grant studied the tactical displays. How many ships are we looking at? Estimates range from 500 to 1,000 capital ships supported by fighters and bombers. They are pulling forces from across the Empire. Then we need to be smarter than ever, President Helen Carter said. We cannot meet them head-on. We need to make every shot count and every ship a threat they cannot ignore. The solution came from an unlikely source. Dr. Linda Shaw was a civilian scientist who had been developing experimental weapons. She proposed a radical idea. Autonomous drone fighters controlled by advanced artificial intelligence. Each one could match the capabilities of a manned fighter, but required no pilot, no life support, no rescue operations. We can build 100 drones for the cost of one manned fighter, Linda explained, and we can be more aggressive with tactics because we are not risking human lives. There were ethical concerns and debates about removing humans from combat decisions. But with the Zalthorn's largest offensive coming, humanity did not have time for long discussions. Within 3 months, the first drone fighters rolled off assembly lines. They were crude and prone to errors and occasionally made spectacularly bad decisions. But they were also fearless, tireless, and expendable. Amy Harris watched the first combat test with interest. Her Marine Raiders had become legendary across human space, but she understood that warfare was evolving. If those things work, what happens to soldiers like us? Marcus Lee, now her second-in-command, shrugged. We adapt. Same as always, the test was a success. A squadron of 50 drones engaged a Zalthorn patrol group and destroyed them with minimal losses. More importantly, when the drones did go down, no human families received death notifications. Production ramped up immediately. Factories that had been building cars and appliances were converted to drone manufacturing. Civilian programmers worked alongside military AI specialists to refine the controlling software. Within 2 months, humanity had deployed over 10,000 autonomous fighters across their defensive lines. The Zalthorn offensive began on schedule with the full might of their assembled fleets dropping out of hyperspace in a dozen systems simultaneously. War Commander Krelnak had planned. For every tactic the humans had shown in the past 8 months, what he had not planned for was facing an enemy that suddenly outnumbered him. The key. First wave of Zalthorn fighters met swarms of human drones. The aliens' superior piloting skills meant nothing when each drone that fell was immediately replaced by 3 more. The Zalthorn pilots found themselves overwhelmed by sheer numbers and forced into defensive formations just to survive. All fleets push forward, Krelnak ordered. Use the capital ships to clear a path. But the drones adapted. They swarmed the larger vessels, targeting weapons and engines with suicidal precision. A single drone could not destroy a Zolthorn cruiser, but 100 drones striking at once could cripple it. Behind the drone screen, human-manned fighters waited. Captain Jake Morrison led one such squadron held in reserve for critical moments when human judgment and creativity were needed. "Remember," he told his pilots, "the drones soften them up. We deliver the killing blow." The Battle of New Dallas became the turning point of the war. The Zolthorn committed 3 full fleets to the attack, expecting to crush the lightly defended colony in hours. Instead, they ran into a meat grinder of drone fighters backed by defensive installations that had been secretly reinforced. Over the previous months, Amy Harris and her Marines were deployed to protect the ground-based shield generators that kept the colony safe from orbital bombardment. When Zolthorn dropships broke through the defensive screen and landed troops, she and her soldiers were ready. The fighting was vicious. The Zolthorn had learned to respect human soldiers in close combat, but they still held numerical superiority. For every alien warrior that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place. "Generator 3 is under heavy assault," Marcus reported. "They are going to break through." "Not on my watch," Amy replied. She rallied every available Marine and led a counterattack that would later be studied in military academies, using the colony's industrial machinery as improvised weapons and fortifications. Her force held the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. In orbit, the battle raged for 3 days. The Zolthorn lost ships at an alarming rate, but they kept coming. Krelnak had staked his reputation on this offensive, and retreat was not an option. On the 3rd day, humanity sprang its trap. While the Zolthorn focused on New Dallas, strike groups hit supply depots and staging areas across 6 systems. The reinforcements Krelnak had been counting on never arrived. His ammunition reserves ran critically low. His damaged ships had nowhere to repair. Faced with complete destruction of his fleets or retreat, Krelnak finally gave the order to withdraw. It was the first time in the Empire's history that they had lost a major offensive campaign. The victory came at a terrible cost. New Dallas was in ruins, though its people had survived. The human fleet had lost 30% of its manned fighters and thousands of drones, but they had proven something crucial. The Zolthorn Empire could be beaten. Admiral Paul Grant addressed the exhausted commanders after the battle. "This is just the beginning. They will come again, probably harder than before. But now we know we can win. Now we know they can be broken." President Helen Carter had a different message for the people of Earth and its colonies. "The Zolthorn Empire gave us a choice. Submit or die. We chose a third option. Fight. And we will keep fighting until they understand that humanity will never be conquered." In the Imperial capital, the Council met in emergency session. For the first time in living memory, they discussed ending a war through negotiation rather than total victory. "The cost is too high," one council member argued. "We have lost more ships in 9 months of fighting humans than in the last century of warfare combined. If we negotiate now, we show weakness," another said. "Every subject species will see it as a chance to rebel." The debate went on for hours. In the end, they reached a compromise. One final offensive mobilizing every available resource. If it succeeded, the humans would be crushed. If it failed, they would seek peace. Neither side knew it yet, but the war was about to enter its final and bloodiest phase. 3 months after the Battle of New Dallas, both sides prepared for what everyone understood would be the war's final act. The Zolthorn Empire had mobilized every available warship, pulling forces from the farthest reaches of their territory. Humanity had converted every factory, every resource, every able body toward the war effort. The next battle would decide everything. Intelligence reports confirmed the Zolthorn fleet was gathering at a staging area just outside human-controlled space. 2,000 capital ships, the largest armada the Empire had ever assembled. Their target was obvious: Earth itself. President Helen Carter stood before the joint session of the United Earth Council. "They are coming for our homeworld. If Earth falls, the colonies will have no choice but to surrender. This is our last stand." Admiral Paul Grant presented the defensive strategy. "We cannot win a conventional battle against those numbers, so we will not fight one. We will turn Earth's solar system into the largest trap in human history." The plan was ambitious and dangerous. Every asteroid in the belt was fitted with engines and explosives, turning them into enormous kinetic missiles. The gas giants' moons became hidden bases for drone swarms. Mars was fortified with enough firepower to serve as a forward defensive position. Even Earth's moon was armed with mass drivers and missile batteries. We are going to make them pay for every mile of space they take, Paul explained. And if they manage to break through everything we throw at them, we will detonate the sun's stellar mass driver and make the whole system a dead zone. There were gasps at that last statement. The stellar mass driver was humanity's most closely guarded secret. A device that could trigger a solar flare large enough to sterilize the inner system. It was a doomsday weapon, one that would kill everyone human and Zolthorn alike. Let us hope it does not come to that, Helen said quietly. Captain Jake Morrison was given command of the manned fighter wing coordinating with the AI-controlled drone swarms. He had survived every major battle of the war, earning the nickname Lucky Jake among the pilots. He did not feel particularly lucky as he studied the enemy force composition. 2,000 ships, his second-in-command said, shaking his head. How do we stop that? One ship at a time, Jake replied. Same as always. Amy Harris and her Marines were assigned to Earth's surface defense. If the Zolthorn managed to land troops, she and thousands of soldiers like her would be all that stood between the enemy and civilian population centers. I never thought I would be fighting on Earth, Marcus Lee said as they inspected the defensive positions around New York. Kind of figured we would win or lose in space. We are not losing, Amy said firmly. Not here. Not ever. The Zolthorn fleet arrived exactly when intelligence predicted. They dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system in perfect formation, a wall of warships that stretched across thousands of miles of space. War Commander Krelnak looked at his tactical display with satisfaction. This is it. The final battle. Today we crush the human resistance forever. His fleet advanced in carefully coordinated waves with sensors sweeping space for the defensive forces they expected to encounter. Instead, they found apparently empty space. Where are their ships? One of his commanders asked. The answer came in the form of 50 asteroids accelerating from the belt, each one moving at relativistic speeds and aimed directly at the Zolthorn formation. The first wave of human traps had been sprung. The Zolthorn point defense systems opened fire, shattering some of the incoming asteroids. But there were too many coming too fast. Several punched through the defensive screen and slammed into capital ships with the force of nuclear weapons. A dozen vessels were destroyed outright. 20 more crippled. Spread out, Krelnak ordered. Do not give them clustered targets. As the fleet dispersed, the second wave of attacks began. Hidden drone fighters, thousands of them, emerged from positions throughout the outer system. They struck in coordinated swarms, overwhelming sensors and targeting systems through sheer numbers. The Zolthorn had prepared for drones. They had developed new countermeasures, better tactics, upgraded point defense systems. But they had not prepared for the scale humanity had achieved. For every drone they destroyed, 2 more appeared. All fleet elements continue advance, Krelnak commanded. Push through their defenses. Reach the inner system. The Zolthorn fleet paid for every light minute of space in blood and metal. By the time they reached Mars, they had lost 300 ships, but there were still 1,700 left. More than enough to crush any remaining resistance. Mars was where humanity deployed its manned fighters. Jake Morrison led the charge. 500 pilots against impossible odds. But they were not alone. The defense platforms around Mars opened fire simultaneously, creating a kill zone that even the Zolthorn's superior shields could not fully protect against. Target their command ships, Jake ordered. Cut off their coordination. The human fighters danced through the Zolthorn formation with desperate grace, targeting communication arrays and command modules. Without effective coordination, the alien fleet's numerical advantage began to work against them. Ships fired on positions where friendly vessels had just moved. Formation integrity broke down. Chaos spread, but the Zolthorn adapted. Krelnak shifted to a decentralized command structure, allowing individual ship captains to make their own tactical decisions. The fleet reorganized and pushed forward, leaving burning wrecks of Mars defense platforms behind them. Earth loomed ahead, blue and beautiful, and defended by humanity's last reserves. The orbital stations opened fire at maximum range. Every weapons platform, every ship, every converted civilian vessel threw everything they had at the approaching enemy. The space around Earth became a maelstrom of fire and death. Ships from both sides died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The battle had no tactics anymore. No strategy. It was simply two forces colliding with absolute determination to destroy the other. Amy Harris watched from the ground as pieces of destroyed ships began falling from orbit, burning through the atmosphere like terrible meteors. She knew each one represented hundreds of lives, human and alien, ending in fire. Captain, we are receiving reports of Zalthorn landing craft breaking through the orbital battle, one of her lieutenants reported. All units prepare. For ground combat, Amy ordered. This is what we trained for. The first Zalthorn troops landed. On the outskirts of New York, Amy's Marines engaged them immediately using the urban terrain to offset the aliens' advantages. In strength and firepower, the fighting was brutal and close range, the kind where humanity's desperation and ferocity made all the difference. In orbit, the battle had reached its climax. Admiral Paul Grant, commanding from the Earth Defense Station, could see they were losing. The Zalthorn still had over 1,000 functional ships. Humanity was down to less than 300. Admiral, his communications officer said quietly, the Council is ordering us to activate the stellar mass driver. Paul looked at the tactical display for a long moment. If they activated the weapon, everyone would die. Humans, Zalthorn, everyone in the solar system. But Earth would survive and the colonies would remain free. It was the definition of winning by losing everything. Wait, he said. Give me one more minute. That minute changed everything. On the bridge of his flagship, War Commander Krelnak was reviewing casualty reports when his sensors detected something unusual. A massive energy buildup in the sun itself, something that could only be an artificial weapon of enormous power. What is that? He demanded. His science officer's response was frightened. Sir, if that weapon activates, it will destroy everything in the inner system, including us. Krelnak had spent his entire career believing in the Empire's superiority, in their inevitable victory over lesser species. But in that moment, looking at the readouts showing a weapon that would kill victors and vanquished alike, he finally understood what he was fighting. He was not fighting soldiers who hoped to win. He was fighting a species that had chosen to never surrender even if it meant mutual extinction. Open a channel to the human command, Krelnak said slowly. All frequencies. I want to talk. Admiral Paul Grant almost did not believe the message when it came through. This is War Commander Krelnak of the Zalthorn Imperial Fleet. I am requesting a ceasefire to discuss terms of peace. The fighting did not stop immediately. Ships kept firing. Soldiers kept fighting. People kept dying. But gradually, over the course of an hour, both sides pulled back. The guns fell silent. The war, at least for now, was over. The negotiations took 3 days and happened on neutral ground. A small research station orbiting Jupiter. President Helen Carter led the human delegation. War Commander Krelnak represented the Empire. Your species is insane, Krelnak said during one of the sessions. You fight with no regard for your own survival. You would destroy yourselves just to deny us victory. We fight for our freedom, Helen replied. That is worth any price. The treaty that emerged was surprisingly generous. The Zalthorn Empire would recognize human sovereignty over all current colonies and provide reparations for war damages. In exchange, humanity would share some of their military innovations, particularly their drone technology, and agree to a non-aggression pact. Most surprisingly, the treaty included a clause for defensive alliance. The Zalthorn had been the dominant power in their region for millennia, but there were threats in the wider galaxy they had kept at bay through military might. Now weakened by the war, they needed allies. We came to conquer you, Krelnak admitted during the signing ceremony. Instead, we learned to respect you. Perhaps that is worth more than another conquered world. Jake Morrison attended the ceremony as a representative of the Fighter Corps. He stood next to Amy Harris, both of them wearing their dress uniforms and carrying the scars of a year of constant warfare. What do you think you will do now? Jake asked her. Amy looked out the viewport at the stars. I do not know. Learn to live in peace, I guess. Maybe that is harder than fighting. Yeah, Jake agreed. But I think we can figure it out. We are pretty good at adapting. The reconstruction took years. Cities had to be rebuilt. Fleets had to be replaced. The dead had to be mourned. But humanity emerged from the war fundamentally changed. They had proven themselves against a superior foe and earned their place among the stars. Admiral Paul Grant, now retired, gave a speech at the dedication of the memorial wall in New York where the names of every human who died in the war were inscribed. They tried to make us submit, he said. They thought we were weak, that we would break. They were wrong, and though we paid a terrible price, we showed not just the Zalthorn but the entire galaxy what humanity is capable of. We are not the strongest species. We are not the most advanced. But we are the ones who will never stop fighting for our freedom, President. Helen Carter had the final word in her address to the United Earth Council on the war's first anniversary. A year ago, we were attacked by an empire that had never known defeat. They saw us as primitives, easy prey. They learned otherwise. But this war taught us something too. That humanity's greatest strength is not our technology or our tactics. It is our absolute refusal to give up no matter the odds. That is what saved us. That is what will carry us forward to whatever challenges we face next. In the years that followed, the humans and Zalthorn developed an unlikely friendship. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges began. Former enemies became partners in exploring the wider galaxy. The war became history. Its lessons learned. Its dead honored. But both species remembered the cost of underestimating humanity. And across the galaxy, a new phrase entered common usage among spacefaring civilizations. Never start a war with humans. They do not fight to win. They fight until you stop fighting back. The war that began with an unprovoked attack on a defenseless colony ended with humanity taking its place as a major power in galactic affairs. Not through conquest or domination, but through the simple, terrible act of refusing to surrender. They should have left humans in peace. Instead, they ignited a full-scale war, and in doing so, they woke something in humanity that would never sleep again. The absolute certainty that freedom was worth any price, any sacrifice, any cost. The galaxy would never be the same. Amy Harris eventually became a general and trained the next generation of Marines. She taught them the lessons learned in blood during the Zalthorn War. Never give up. Never surrender. Fight with everything you have because your enemy might underestimate you, but they will never make that mistake twice. Jake Morrison took command of humanity's first deep space exploration fleet. He led missions into uncharted territory, making contact with new species, always with a message of peace, but always ready to fight if needed. The ships under his command carried the scars and the lessons of the war. They were explorers, but they were also warriors. Marcus Lee returned to civilian life and wrote a book about his experiences. It became required reading in every military academy across human space. The book's title was simple: We Refused to Die. It told the story of ordinary people who faced impossible odds and won through sheer determination. Dr. Linda Shaw continued her work on autonomous combat systems. But she also became an advocate for peaceful applications of her technology, drones that could explore dangerous environments, AI that could help rather than harm. She understood better than most that the tools of war could become the tools of peace. President Helen Carter served 2 more terms and oversaw the transformation of Earth's military from a defensive force into a true interstellar power. Under her leadership, humanity built alliances with dozens of species. The Zalthorn War had proven humans could fight. The peace that followed proved they could also lead. The Memorial Wall in New York became a place of pilgrimage. People came from across human space to see the names inscribed there, to remember the price of freedom, to honor those who paid it. The wall stretched for miles, and every name represented a story, a life given so others could live free. On the 10th anniversary of the war's end, a joint ceremony was held. Humans and Zalthorn together, honoring the dead from both sides. Krelnak, now retired, attended the ceremony. He stood before the memorial wall and placed his hand against the cold stone. "We were fools," he said to Helen Carter, who stood beside him. "We thought strength was measured in ships and weapons. We learned it is measured in will." "We were desperate," Helen replied. "Desperation makes you do things you never thought possible." "We are just glad it is over, is it?" Krelnak asked. The fighting stopped, but the war changed both our species forever. That change will echo through generations. "Then we make sure those echoes are good ones," Helen said. "We teach our children that war should always be the last option. That peace is worth fighting for." The galaxy had indeed changed. The Zalthorn Empire was no longer the unquestioned power it once was. But it had gained something more valuable than dominance. It had gained allies who would stand with them against common threats. Humanity had proven that even the smallest species could change the course of history if they refused to be conquered. New threats did emerge in the following years. Hostile species from beyond known space, ancient machines that had slumbered for millennia, dark forces that threatened all life. But when those threats came, humanity and the Zalthorn stood together. The bond forged in war proved stronger than anyone expected. The lesson of the Zalthorn War spread across the galaxy. Do not judge a species by their technology or their numbers. Judge them by their will to survive. And never ever underestimate humans. They might be young, they might be crude, but they will never stop fighting for what they believe in. The survivors of the war carried its memory for the rest of their lives. They had seen the worst of what sentient beings could do to each other, but they had also seen the best. The courage of those who stood when they should have run, the sacrifice of those who gave everything for others, the determination of a species that refused to bow. Amy Harris, on her deathbed decades later, was asked what she remembered most about the war. She thought for a long moment before answering. I remember being terrified every single day, but I also remember knowing that giving up was not an option. We fought because we had to. We won because we refused to lose. That is what humans do. We find a way or we make one. Those words were inscribed on a plaque at the entrance to the memorial. They became the unofficial motto of Earth's military, a reminder of where humanity came from and what they were capable of when pushed to the edge. The galaxy learned to respect humans, not because they were the strongest or the smartest,